Somewhere in the world right now, there's a secret meeting happening. Powerful people sitting around a table, deciding the fate of the global economy. They control the banks, they control the governments. They've been pulling the strings for over 200 years. At least, that's what the conspiracy theories say. And at the center of it all, one name keeps coming up again and again: the Rothschilds. You've probably heard the claims. This family controls $500 trillion. They own every central bank in the world. They started every major war in the last 2 centuries just to profit from both sides. But here's the thing. What if I told you that most of what you've heard about the Rothschilds is completely made up? Tonight, we're going to open the black box and separate fact from fiction. We'll look at what the Rothschilds actually did, how powerful they really were, and why they became the world's favorite villain. Let's start with the numbers. $500 trillion. That's the figure you'll see floating around the internet. To put that in perspective, the entire world's wealth combined is around $450 trillion. So conspiracy theorists are saying the Rothschilds own more than everything on Earth. That doesn't make any sense. The real numbers? Estimates put the entire Rothschild family's wealth at around $400 to $500 billion. That's billion with a B, not trillion with a T. And that's spread across hundreds of family members over 7 generations. For comparison, BlackRock, a single investment company, manages over $10 trillion. Elon Musk alone is worth around $200 billion. The richest Rothschild who made it onto Forbes's billionaire list was Benjamin de Rothschild, and his net worth was about $1.5 billion. So the Rothschilds are rich, yes, but they're not even close to the richest family in the world today. They don't even crack the top 100.
But they weren't always like this.
To understand how the myth got so big, we need to go back to where it all started. The year was 1744. The place was Frankfurt, Germany. But not the Frankfurt you might picture today. We're talking about the Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto. A narrow alley, barely 12 feet wide, packed with overcrowded buildings. The gates were locked every night, all day on Sundays, and during Christian holidays. This is where Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born. His house was called the Hinterpfanne, which means house in the back of the saucepan. In the ghetto, houses had colourful names instead of addresses, and some families took their surnames from their houses. The Rothschild family lived in a house marked with a red shield. In German, that's Rotes Schild. Over time, it became Rothschild. So the name that would become synonymous with global banking conspiracy started as simply the family from the house with the red sign. Meyer Amschel grew up poor in a cramped, dark building shared with another family. The total living space was about 900 square feet, split between maybe 12 people. That includes the space for their businesses, but Meyer Amschel had 2 things going for him. He was smart with numbers. And in the 18th century, there was one profession that Jews were actually allowed to do that Christians couldn't: lending money and charging interest. The Catholic Church had declared usury a sin. So when noblemen and kings needed loans, they had to go to Jewish moneylenders. Meyer Amschel started small, trading coins and antiques. He built relationships with local nobility. He earned a reputation for being trustworthy and discreet, and then he had a brilliant idea that would change everything. He had 5 sons, and instead of keeping the business in one city, he sent each son to a different financial capital in Europe. Nathan went to London, James went to Paris, Salomon went to Vienna, Karl went to Naples, and Amschel stayed in Frankfurt. For the first time in history, A family had a private banking network spanning all of Europe. They could move money across borders faster than governments could. They could share information through their own courier system, which was faster than official channels. This wasn't a conspiracy, it was just good business strategy. But in a world that already distrusted Jews, a family this successful was bound to attract suspicion. And suspicion, mixed with jealousy and centuries of prejudice, would eventually turn into something much darker. The Rothschilds did become incredibly powerful in the 19th century. That part is true. But the story of how that power was exaggerated into world domination began with a single battle and a myth that refuses to die. The black box stays open. And the truth is just getting started. Picture Europe in the early 1800s. Napoleon is conquering everything in sight. Armies are marching across borders. Empires are crumbling. And in the middle of all this chaos, 5 brothers are building something that's never existed before, a multinational banking network. Nathan Rothschild, the third of the 5 brothers, arrived in London in 1800. He was just 23 years old. He started as a textile merchant in Manchester, but he quickly realized where the real money was: finance. London was becoming the financial capital of the world, and Nathan wanted to be at the center of it. The thing about the Rothschild brothers was their coordination. They weren't 5 separate businesses competing with each other. They were one organism with 5 arms reaching across Europe. When Nathan in London needed information from the continent, his brothers sent it. When James in Paris needed capital, Nathan provided it. Their private courier network was legendary. They used carrier pigeons, fast horses, and their own boats. In an era when news from Paris to London could take days,
The Rothschilds could get information in hours. This wasn't cheating, this was innovation. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British government had a problem. They needed to pay their soldiers fighting in Spain, but moving gold across war-torn Europe was nearly impossible. Napoleon controlled most of the continent. Nathan Rothschild solved this problem. He developed a system to move money through enemy territory, using bills of exchange and a network of trusted contacts. It was risky, it was complicated, but it worked. The British government paid the Rothschilds handsomely for this service, not because they were manipulating anyone, but because they were providing something nobody else could. By 1815, the Rothschild brothers had established themselves as the go-to bankers for European governments. They weren't controlling these governments, they were serving them. There's a big difference. But that distinction would soon be lost in the fog of war and propaganda. When Napoleon escaped from exile in 1815 and raised another army, Europe held its breath. Everything depended on the outcome of one battle, Waterloo. And it's here that the most famous myth about the Rothschilds was born. A myth so persistent that it still circulates today, over 200 years later. According to the legend, Nathan Rothschild was actually at the Battle of Waterloo. He watched the fighting, saw that Napoleon was losing, and immediately raced back to London ahead of everyone else. When he arrived at the stock exchange, instead of buying, he started selling. Everyone assumed he knew something they didn't. If Rothschild is selling, Napoleon must have won. Panic spread, prices crashed, and then, at the last moment, Nathan bought everything at rock-bottom prices. When the real news arrived that Britain had won, prices soared, and Nathan made a fortune. It's a great story. There's just one problem. It never happened.
The most famous story about the Rothschilds is also the biggest lie. Let's break down what the legend claims. Nathan Rothschild stood at Waterloo watching the battle. He personally raced back to London. He deliberately spread false news to crash the market, and he made the family's entire fortune in one day of deception. Now let's look at the facts. The Battle of Waterloo happened on June 18, 1815. Nathan Rothschild was not there. He was in London the entire time. There's no historical evidence placing him anywhere near Belgium. But yes, Nathan did receive news of the British victory before the government did. His courier network was that good. A Rothschild agent named John Roworth got the news in the Netherlands and crossed the English Channel immediately. Nathan probably knew the outcome about 24 hours before the official announcement. Did he use this advantage? Probably. That's what merchants did. But here's what the conspiracy theorists get wrong. First, Nathan didn't spread false news. He simply received true news faster. Second, there was no massive market manipulation. According to historian Niall Ferguson, who spent years researching the Rothschild archives, the total profit Nathan could have made from advanced knowledge of Waterloo was maybe £7,000. That's a lot of money, but it's not buying England money. Third, the real source of Rothschild wealth from the war wasn't stock manipulation. It was a government contract to supply gold and silver coins to the Duke of Wellington's army. They made money through commissions and currency exchange, not deception. So where did the myth come from? In 1846, 31 years after Waterloo, a French pamphlet appeared in Paris. It was called The Edifying and Curious History of Rothschild I, King of the Jews. The author used a pseudonym. He called himself Satan. His real name was Georges Derneville, and he had one goal: to spread hatred against Jews. The pamphlet was classic anti-Semitic propaganda. It portrayed Nathan Rothschild as a greedy, scheming villain who had no loyalty to any country and would sell out anyone for profit. The Waterloo story was the centerpiece. The pamphlet was popular. It got translated into other languages. The story spread. And here's the tragic part. Within a few decades, the myth had become so widespread that it started appearing in legitimate publications. Even the Encyclopaedia Britannica's 11th edition, published between 1910 and 1911, repeated the Waterloo legend as if it were fact. Researchers like Brian Cathcart have traced the evolution of this myth. Each retelling added new details. The story got more dramatic. Nathan went from receiving news early to actually being at the battle. The modest profit became a fortune that bought the British Empire. But the core accusation remained the same. The Rothschilds got rich through deception and manipulation. They couldn't be trusted. They were outsiders who preyed on honest Christians. This wasn't history. This was propaganda. The real story of how the Rothschilds built their empire is actually more interesting than the myth. It involved real innovation, real risk, and real contributions to society. But that story doesn't fit the narrative. And for 200 years, the myth has been more popular than the truth. In 1875, the British Prime Minister needed £4 million, immediately. The ruler of Egypt was bankrupt and willing to sell his shares in the Suez Canal. Whoever owned those shares would control one of the most important shipping routes in the world. Britain wanted them, but Parliament was not in session. There was no way to approve the budget in time. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, sent his secretary to visit one man.
Lionel de Rothschild. The secretary explained the situation. The government needed £4 million to secure the Suez Canal shares. What was the collateral? The British government, Lionel was told. Lionel thought for a moment. Then he picked a grape from a bowl, ate it, and said, "You shall have it." Within days, the money was transferred. Britain became the largest shareholder in the Suez Canal, and the Rothschilds earned a nice commission. This is the kind of power the Rothschilds actually had in the 19th century. They weren't secretly controlling governments. They were providing services that governments desperately needed. There's a difference. Let's look at what they actually did. Railways. The Rothschilds financed the construction of railways across Europe. In France, James de Rothschild funded lines connecting Paris to Lyon, Paris to Bordeaux, and many others. In Austria, Salomon Rothschild backed the Northern Railway. In Italy, Karl Rothschild did the same. Railways were the technology of the future. Building them required massive capital that most governments didn't have. The Rothschilds provided that capital. Government bonds. Between 1895 and 1907, Rothschild banks loaned nearly $450 million to European governments. That's about $15 billion in today's money. They financed wars, infrastructure projects, and national debts. Philanthropy. This part often gets ignored. The Rothschilds gave away enormous amounts of money. During the Irish potato famine in 1847, Lionel de Rothschild helped found the British Relief Association. They raised over £600,000 for famine victims. That was the largest private relief fund for Ireland. Charlotte de Rothschild supported 32 different charitable organisations. In Frankfurt, the family ran about 30 charities. Amschel Rothschild donated 10% of his income to charity. Were they perfect? No. They were businessmen who wanted to make money. They sometimes used their financial power to pressure governments. They had conflicts of interest. But were they secretly controlling the world? Also no. The Rothschilds operated in a world where being visibly wealthy and visibly Jewish made you a target. Every success was viewed with suspicion. Every failure of the economy was blamed on them. One British politician named Thomas Duncombe said in 1828 that Rothschild boasts of being the arbiter of peace and war, and that the credit of nations depends upon his nod. This was an exaggeration, but it showed how people perceived the family. And perception, as we'll see, is everything. The real power of the Rothschilds peaked somewhere around the mid-19th century. For a few decades, they probably were the richest family in the world. They had more liquid capital than most governments. But power never lasts forever. The world was changing. New kinds of banks were emerging. Joint stock companies could raise capital that no family could match. And the very visibility that made the Rothschilds famous would soon make them targets of something far worse than jealousy. Imagine this. A family builds railways across Europe. They help governments buy crucial infrastructure. They donate millions to famine victims, and in return, they get called a blood-sucking octopus trying to strangle the world. This is the fate of the Rothschilds. And to understand why, we need to go back much further than the 19th century. We need to go back to the roots of anti-Semitism itself. In medieval Europe, Jews were outsiders. They couldn't own land, they couldn't join craft guilds, they were forced to live in designated areas. But there was one profession open to them that Christians couldn't do: lending money with interest. The Catholic Church called usury a sin, so when kings and nobles needed loans,
they went to Jewish moneylenders. And when it came time to repay those loans with interest, resentment grew. This created a stereotype that would last for centuries. Jews as greedy money grabbers, heartless creditors who cared only about profit. Then came the Crusades. In 1096, armies marching to the Holy Land massacred Jewish communities along the way. The excuse? Punishing the people who killed Christ. Then came the Black Death. Between 1348 and 1351, plague killed millions across Europe. And who got blamed? Jews were accused of poisoning wells. Hundreds of Jewish communities were destroyed in the violence that followed. Every time Europe faced a crisis, Jews became the scapegoat, not because of anything they actually did, but because they were the permanent outsiders, the easy target. By the time the Rothschilds rose to prominence in the 19th century, this pattern was centuries old, and a Jewish family becoming the richest in Europe, that confirmed every paranoid suspicion. In 1903, a document appeared in Russia. It was called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This document claimed to be the secret minutes of a Jewish meeting where leaders planned to take over the world. They would control banks, media, and governments. They would start wars and cause economic chaos to weaken the nations. It was a complete forgery. Scholars quickly proved it was plagiarized from a French political satire that had nothing to do with Jews. But that didn't matter. The protocols spread worldwide. They were translated into dozens of languages. They became the foundation for a new generation of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And guess which family was mentioned most often in discussions of the protocols? The Rothschilds. The absolute peak of anti-Rothschild propaganda came from the Nazis. In 1940, Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry produced a film called The Rothschilds, Shares in Waterloo. It told the false Waterloo story, portraying Nathan Rothschild as a lying, scheming villain who betrayed England for profit. The film ended with a map showing the spread of the Rothschild Empire across Europe, morphing into a Star of David, spreading like a disease. Nazi propaganda also loved the octopus image. Posters showed a Jewish figure with tentacles wrapped around the globe, squeezing the life out of nations. The Rothschild name was practically synonymous with this image. But here's the tragic irony. While the Nazis were making films about Rothschild world domination, the actual Rothschilds were fleeing for their lives. Their properties in Austria and Germany were seized. Louis Rothschild was imprisoned for a year before being released after surrendering all Austrian assets. Family members escaped to England and America as refugees. The family that supposedly controlled the world couldn't even protect themselves from one government. After World War II, you might think the propaganda would stop. The Nazis were defeated. The Holocaust revealed where anti-Semitism could lead. But conspiracy theories don't die that easily. They just change shape. If you've spent any time in conspiracy theory circles, you've probably heard this claim. The Rothschilds own the Federal Reserve. They control America's money supply. Every dollar printed makes them richer. It's one of the most popular theories about the family, and it's completely false. Let's look at what the Federal Reserve actually is and how it was created. In 1907, America had a banking crisis. Banks were failing, people were panicking. There was no central bank to stabilize the system. One man, J.P. Morgan, personally organized the rescue. He gathered the country's top bankers and forced them to work together to stop the collapse. It worked. But everyone realized America needed a better system. They couldn't rely on one rich banker every time there was a crisis. In 1910, a group of financiers and government officials met secretly at Jekyll Island, Georgia. They drafted a plan for what would become the Federal Reserve System. Who was there? Senator Nelson Aldrich, Treasury official A. Piatt Andrew, representatives from the Morgan and Rockefeller banking empires. Paul Warburg, a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Who was not there? Any Rothschild. There's no record of any Rothschild family member participating in the Jekyll Island meeting or the subsequent legislation. The Federal Reserve was created by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Let's look at how it actually works. The Federal Reserve System has 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. These banks are technically owned by their member commercial banks, not by individuals, not by families, by banks. The Board of Governors, which actually makes monetary policy, is appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. These are government officials, not private bankers. Could the Rothschilds secretly own stock in the member banks that technically own the Federal Reserve banks? Theoretically, anyone could own bank stock. But ownership of bank stock doesn't give you control over monetary policy. That's not how the system works. Here's another important fact. By the time the Federal Reserve was created, the Rothschilds were not major players in American finance. They never had been. America's financial system was dominated by American bankers, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Mellons. These were the real power players on Wall Street. The Rothschilds focused on Europe. Today, if you want to talk about who manages the most money in the world, look at companies like BlackRock. They manage over $10 trillion. Vanguard manages around $8 trillion. State Street manages about $4 trillion. J.P. Morgan Chase manages over $4 trillion. Rothschild and Company? They manage around $100 billion. That's less than 1% of what BlackRock handles. The Rothschilds today run a boutique investment bank. They specialize in mergers and acquisitions advisory. They manage wealth for rich clients. It's a respectable business, but it's not controlling the global financial system. So why does the myth persist? Because the Rothschild name sounds mysterious. Because they've been around for over 200 years. Because they're Jewish, which unfortunately still triggers prejudice in some people. And because blaming a shadowy banking family is more exciting than understanding how monetary policy actually works. The truth is complicated. The Federal Reserve is an imperfect institution run by appointed officials and influenced by economic theories and political pressures. Nobody controls it in the way conspiracy theorists imagine. But complicated truths don't go viral. Simple villains do. Here's something the conspiracy theories never tell you. The Rothschild family has been in decline for over a century. Let's trace what actually happened. World War I broke out in 1914. The Rothschild brothers had branches in countries that were now at war with each other. The London branch was British. The Paris branch was French. The Vienna branch was Austrian, now an enemy. Overnight, their greatest strength became a weakness. The family network that could move money across borders was now split by battle lines. Assets in enemy countries were frozen or seized. After the war, things got worse. The Austrian Empire collapsed. The Vienna Rothschilds lost their biggest client. Hyperinflation in Germany destroyed the value of Frankfurt assets. The Russian Revolution wiped out all their holdings in Russia. By the 1920s, 2 of the 5 original branches were effectively dead. Naples had closed in the late 19th century due to lack of male heirs. Frankfurt would never recover from the war and inflation. Then came the Nazis. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria. The Rothschild properties in Vienna were among the first to be seized. Louis Rothschild was arrested and held for over a year. He was only released after surrendering every asset the family owned in Austria. The Paris Rothschilds fled when Germany invaded France. Their homes, their art collections, their wine cellars, everything was looted. After World War II, only two branches survived, London and Paris, and even these were shadows of their former selves. In France, the socialist government nationalized Banque Rothschild in 1981. The family eventually rebuilt, but on a much smaller scale. The deaths keep coming. Benjamin de Rothschild, who was worth about $1.1 billion and was the only family member on Forbes' billionaire list, died in January 2021 at age 57. Lord Jacob Rothschild, one of the most prominent family members, died in February 2024 at age 87. His estimated worth was around $1 billion. Let's put these numbers in perspective. Elon Musk is worth over $200 billion. That's 200 times the wealth of the richest Rothschild. Jeff Bezos is worth about $150 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, about $100 billion. No Rothschild appears in the top 100 global billionaires. Most family members don't even qualify for national rich lists. The family wealth, whatever it once was, has been diluted across 7 generations and hundreds of heirs spread around the world. There's no central Rothschild treasury. There's no unified family bank anymore. What do the Rothschilds actually do today? They run Rothschild & Co., a boutique bank specializing in mergers and acquisitions advisory. They help companies buy and sell other companies. They manage wealth for rich clients. It's profitable, but it's not world domination. They also make wine. Chateau Lafite Rothschild and Chateau Mouton Rothschild are among the most famous wineries in the world. The family owns vineyards in France, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Premium wine is nice, but it's not exactly controlling the global economy. The Rothschilds today are like the Vanderbilts or the Astors, names that were once synonymous with unimaginable wealth, but have faded from the ranks of the truly powerful. The difference is that nobody makes conspiracy theories about the Vanderbilts. Imagine you're walking through a forest thousands of years ago. Suddenly, you hear a branch snap in the bushes ahead. What does your brain do? It assumes something is hiding there, maybe a tiger, maybe a snake, maybe an enemy. Your brain doesn't wait for evidence. It assumes danger first and asks questions later. This makes sense for survival. If you're wrong and there's no tiger, you just feel silly. If you're wrong and there is a tiger, you're dead. This instinct is called pattern detection or agency detection. Our brains are wired to assume that events have causes, and usually those causes are someone or something with intentions. In the ancient forest, this kept us alive. In the modern world, it creates conspiracy theories. Think about the 2008 financial crisis. Banks collapsed, millions of people lost their homes, stock markets crashed worldwide. What actually caused it? A complex mix of factors: low interest rates, subprime lending, complicated derivatives, regulatory failures, human greed at every level of the system. But that explanation isn't satisfying to our brains. Our brains want a villain. Our brains want someone to blame. Because if there's a villain, we can get angry. We can demand justice. We can imagine fighting back. But if the crisis was caused by a system so complex that no one fully controlled it, That's terrifying. It means we're all on a ship with no captain, drifting on waves nobody understands. Conspiracy theories are comforting in a strange way. They tell us someone is in charge. Even if that someone is evil, at least the world makes sense. The Rothschilds are the perfect villains for this purpose. They're rich, they're mysterious. They've been around for over 200 years. And they're Jewish, which taps into prejudices that go back millennia. Blaming the Rothschilds makes the world simpler. If one family controls the global economy, then economic problems aren't random, they're planned, and plans can be stopped. But here's what conspiracy theorists can't accept. The truth is scarier than the conspiracy. No one controls the global economy. It's a system of billions of people making trillions of decisions. Sometimes those decisions combine to create prosperity. Sometimes they combine to create disasters. There's no master plan. There's no secret meeting where the elite decide our fates. There's just a chaotic system that's too complex for anyone to fully understand or control. Even the richest people in the world, even the most powerful governments, are mostly just reacting to events they didn't predict and can't fully manage. This is frightening, but it's also liberating. Because if no one is controlling everything, then change is possible. The system isn't locked. New ideas can emerge, new balances of power can develop. The Rothschilds are just one family in history. They were powerful once, they declined. Like every empire, like every dynasty. Nothing lasts forever, not even the power of the richest family in the world. And maybe that's the most important lesson here. What we should fear isn't a mysterious family hiding in the shadows. What we should fear is the belief that stops us from thinking. The story that's so compelling, we never question it. In a world full of information, the most valuable skill isn't knowing all the answers. It's knowing how to separate answers based on evidence from answers based on fear. The black box is closed now, but the questioning never stops. See you next time.